Welcome to Brain Body Speak, the podcast that bridges the worlds of psychology, somatic healing, neuroscience, and energetics, as well as holistic health. I'm Joy McCabe, here to help you understand complex topics by breaking them down into straightforward concepts and practical examples so you can understand your brain, your body, your nervous system, and your conscious and subconscious mind. The knowledge you'll find in this show will be your secret weapon as you learn the language of health, happiness, and success. We'll dive deep into unique perspectives on topics like mental and physical health, mindset, trauma healing, and so much more, offering you actionable tools and insights to transform each area of your life. And hey, if you're a business owner or CEO looking for all of these topics specifically catered to entrepreneurship, make sure to check out my other show, The Regulated CEO. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today I have my client and guest, Steele, and this is another one of the healing journey stories where we dive in deep and we really highlight all the different phases and levels of the healing journey, the process, what it's like, what real transformation actually looks like over the long haul, and also just, again, hearing stories that might resonate with you, inspire you, help you work through some things on your own, and also giving my clients an opportunity to really have this big picture vision and reflection on their healing journey and their process. So, Steele, welcome to your healing journey story. And we're just going to dive right in. We're going to kind of start from the beginning. You've been with me now through 2 cycles. This is the end of our second cycle. A lot of times I do these calls at the end of the first cycle, which is 4 months. Ours just worked out where we've gone through a second cycle, which has been very different than your first cycle. So we'll kind of break down what that looks like. And just for anyone who might be new here, in my process, the Satori method, we go through sort of phases. It's a 4-month sort of foundation, and then we kind of build on that. And Steele is at the end of her second cycle with me, which has, again, been very different than her first. So, Steele, I'm excited to have this conversation with you, to reflect back, to hear your story. And I want to just start at the beginning and have you share where you were at, if you can time travel back, when you decided to make this call, I'm signing up, I'm doing this, and what you were originally struggling with, and we'll just kind of let it evolve from there.
Yeah. So originally, when I got in contact with you, I was dealing with probably one of the most difficult things I've ever dealt with in my life, which was some health concerns that I had never had before. I was reacting to some histamine issues, didn't even know what that was or what it was about. And I had a friend that kind of nudged me that histamine goes a lot deeper than just physical symptoms. And I just remember thinking, I cannot live like this the rest of my life. And that's just my personality, that if I put my mind to it and I decide I will not go through this the rest of my life, I can accomplish anything with the right knowledge. And it led me to you. And this was the path that I took on, not just focusing on my physical health, but what is the root cause of the histamine issues that I was dealing with, because it was pretty terrifying.
Yeah. And take me back a little bit more to that because you had a friend, you were in a unique position where you had a friend that had also went through the program, and hearing that from someone without having, followed me or listened to my content over the years, or this was kind of like a new concept to you, right? Like this whole, like, wait
Yeah.
a minute, physical health, mental health, emotional health, like these are all connected. Like, tell me about kind of where your head was at and what that sounded like coming from her, maybe initial hesitations, doubts, or epiphanies that you had.
Yeah, it was the first word that comes to my mind is it was validating,
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't just dealing with the histamine issues. I went the traditional medicine route to heal it, and it actually made me worse.
Uh-huh.
And so I was going through some issues and side effects from the medication that just compounded the issue. And so I felt really lost. And so I seeked guidance through social media. And
Yeah.
I did stumble across like EFT tapping and mental health and how everything's tied together, but I wasn't finding answers. It was these quick, like 60-second videos of, hey, try this and try this. And I wasn't able to connect the dots. And I actually disconnected from a lot of my friends, that friend being one of them. And I remember a month and a half in, she reached out to me and was like, you need to check in. I don't know what's going on with you. You need to check in.
Yeah.
And I just hesitated and I wasn't going to share with her, but I was like, something pulled me to tell her what was going on.
Hmm.
And when I shared that with her, that was what she shared was like, this goes a lot deeper, Steele. And she shared kind of you and your program and what she went through, which was very eye-opening for me. So that was validating that I had a friend and I didn't feel like I was crazy because everybody I was talking to in my personal life, they were like, I've never heard of that. I don't even know what you're talking about. And I was like, thanks.
Yeah.
So that really helped me. And then I trusted her and she just said, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. And it changed my life. And that was enough for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things you're speaking to is even it's been a part of our process and we'll touch on it, but the whole, you have a problem and you go to social media and you start researching and stuff. There has never been a more turbulent time to try to find answers for anything than the space that we live in now, where we find 5 million bits of 8-second, sensational viral content that does nothing but overwhelm and confuse us. And there is no connecting the dots. There is no actual process. And so people really get stuck in these loops where they're not only comparing 100 different perspectives or opinions, but they're trying just to throw everything in the kitchen sink at their healing or do all of these things, but it's not an actual guided therapeutic clinical process. And people having kind of doubts of, well, wait a minute, mind body connected, they kind of also have this invalidation towards people of, well, like, aren't the doctors fixing this? Like, isn't there a medication for this? Or like, have you seen a counselor and maybe gotten on some antidepressants? They really truly think that these problems just are very easy to identify and very easy to fix, when, as most people that have gone through this process know, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is not. And I think when you asked about the hesitation and you just talking, my biggest hesitation came from when you did your first intake with me. And I can't believe I'm going to say this because we're going to get into it and it's night and day, but I remember telling you, I don't really have a lot of trauma. I can't I can't really relate to 95% of what you were saying. So I didn't truly know if the program was built for me.
Hmm.
And I was like, I just have this, can you just fix this one problem for me? Do I have to do the 4 months?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And well, let's just kind of shift gears into that, because that is another very, very common thing. I often share with my clients, as much as I honor every person's very unique, experience and personality and brain and all the things, it really is like I almost work with the exact same person over and over again, because there's so many core elements. I think especially the type of women who generally gravitate towards my content and my style. They are very driven, type A, like high level leaders. They're hard charging. They're very successful. It's not a lot of like kumbaya stuff, which I get because that's also like my nature. So we have this kind of innate perspective of, I'm really strong. I really know how to get up and, go to work and accomplish things and push, push, push. So they have this perception of themselves of, I'm a little stressed maybe, or I have this one little thing, but like I don't really have a lot of problems. And I'm like, okay, but then we start opening and it's like, wow, there's all of this stuff here. And I always use the phrase, it's the water we swim in. A fish doesn't sit back and say, I'm really wet, because it's just all they've known and all they've experienced, and they're very good at swimming through the water. But once you realize like, oh, I'm not actually supposed to be a fish, I'm supposed to be over here, and you experience that shift, then you have that contrast. I want to touch on something just really quickly that kind of speaks to that, which is, I recall also from the beginning when you did your numbers. I track everything for any listener. Everything from the get-go is measured, and we rate things, and we're doing these different inventory reports. You also struggled with sort of differentiating certain things and also just feeling like, I don't connect to these emotions or these symptoms. Tell me a little bit about that and how that has evolved for you.
Yeah, that was probably one of the hardest things in the beginning, especially with you saying that a lot of your clients are very similar because I want to do well and I want to feel the whole process and I want to feel like it's working.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I sat down with the inventory assessment and I went through those emotions, I couldn't relate to a lot of them. And the ones that I could relate to were so overpowering because I was dealing with anxiety and reactions and all of this stuff and the ruminating. And so it was like I was either a 10 or I felt nothing. And it was
Mm-hmm.
just everything was blurring together. And then I didn't really understand the power of emotions. I think I spent most of my life avoiding emotions that I thought were bad and I didn't want to relate to in a negative way. So it's not that I think I rejected the idea of feeling those. So I couldn't connect. I couldn't get to that part of myself that felt the emotions that I feared.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know one of the struggles, that it presents for anybody, but this was especially the case for you was very much like, okay, I'm doing this, but I don't feel it. Like I don't feel it. And that's a important thing to recognize for anyone in a healing process. Again, going back to the social media and this idea that everything needs to be so intense, so high level. And not only does trauma and stress sort of like numb us out and our coping mechanisms numb us out, but social media and dopamine and neurochemistry, which is a big part of the stuff we address in these containers, also plays a big part. And when people are stressed, overworked, they've suppressed their whole lives, and then they use coping checkout mechanisms like scrolling, Netflix, whether it's cannabis, alcohol, across the board, pick your poison. They have a very, very hard time slowing down, tuning in, feeling their emotions. And then if they do, the antidote for that, the tool that we're using, it's meant to be small dose, micro, built on over time. It almost feels so non-eventful that it's like, no, like we are basically programmed that the only thing that hits our radar as important is dramatic, intense, really, really, really stressful, or really, really exciting. And that's how the brain changes and evolves. So it's very common in the beginning to look at that list and to be so utterly annoyed with the whole process and also feel completely disconnected. I know one of the examples that I gave you, and this is for anyone in my age bracket, which is 40, The Karate Kid was like this really, popular film, I think in the early 90s. And the whole pretense is there's this like advanced sensei that has all these skills, and he's trying to teach this kid how to be like this karate master. But he literally just has him wax the car, wax on, wax off, wax on. And he has him do all of these like really redundant, non-sexy, non-cool things until he gets mad and he's like, what's the point of all of this? Like, I came here to learn karate. And then he does these karate moves, and like all the stuff that he had taught him that he thought was pointless and didn't relate was actually teaching him how to react. And I'm like, that is such a perfect analogy of how these tools work. It doesn't make sense. You don't resonate. You don't like it. But then when it comes time, like when you can look back, you're like, oh, reps and sets. Now I get it. And it starts to come together. So I want to kind of talk about if you can remember a moment where maybe that epiphany of, I get it, kind of settled with you, or you started to see that it wasn't necessarily about feeling this huge cathartic process or tuning in and like having this big instant transformation, but when you realized that the compounded effort over time was actually creating change.
I think there was probably a few milestones, and I think the best way to articulate it would probably be at the beginning when we were trying to talk through things, and especially with the tools that you were giving me. I was so frustrated that I didn't feel anything, and I think I still kind of struggle with that to this day because I'm looking for something big to happen and
Mm-hmm.
nothing big happens. So it's like you do such a small tool and then you go about your day.
Yeah.
Mine comes from feeling the mental exhaustion towards the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
which usually I can remember a couple times where I was dealing with some really heavy stuff and I really locked in on the tools, but they were so frustrating because I said, this is not helping me. I don't feel any better.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would be like, drink water and take it easy today. It's like you were anticipating a crash.
Mm-hmm.
And so I listened to you and I felt the crash, but I felt like I got the best sleep in my life
Mm-hmm.
after those moments. And I woke up feeling better. And so that was probably the first small, subtle shift is that, and you're the one that linked the two. I probably would have never connected the two if it wasn't for being open to this process and having those conversations with you, because there were so many times where something would happen and I would immediately downplay it and say that's not important. And then
Mm-hmm.
there was this little voice in my head was like, it might just say it. If you say it to Holly and it's not important, no skin off your back. Like you're fine. It doesn't do anything. But if you don't say it and it has a big impact, Holly will have some sort of messaging or insight for you.
Mm-hmm.
And almost every time, I don't think there's been a single time where I've chosen to share something I was unsure about and you said that's not relevant.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really, I think, such an important thing for people to know too, because A lot of times the first month in the process with me, again, very type A, independent, strong women. They're not the type of women that are sending me 45-minute Voxer messages and crying about their emotions. That's not the person. It's the, hey, by the way, you're in this container. You should probably like check in with me. Like, you should probably let me know how you're doing. Like, I have to train that because, again, that hyper independence that I'm okay, I've got this runs very, very, very strong and very deep. So that's a learning process in and of itself. But then, as I've said, and I think all of these healing journey stories, one of my biggest jobs is to literally just be the person that's holding up the mirror and highlighting all of the shifts, because it also goes back to that whole the water we swim in. When the water starts to change a little bit, like if it was cold and then it starts getting a little warmer, 1 degree at a time, we don't notice that. We don't feel it. But I can see the thermostat on the outside, and I'm like, by the way, we are in water that's 20 degrees hotter, you know? And it's that highlighting, it's that reflection, which is why we track the numbers and why that's such a big part of the process. But so often the change is so subtle and so gradual that we don't feel it, but then also we don't recognize it until there's that moment of, okay, here's what's happening. Here's what shifted. Here's how this changed and evolved and has gotten better for you. How would have, the you from 3 months ago responded versus now? And those are the moments where it literally kind of solidifies in your brain and body on a deeper level, when you can really look back and be like, it's much like losing weight, where you're losing a pound a week. You just don't feel it until suddenly you see a picture and you're like, oh my gosh, I've lost 30 pounds over the last 6 months. Mind blowing. But because we're so conditioned to have those big transformational, monumental moments in a flash, we have to train our minds to start looking at the subtle and the really small things and not look for that level of like catastrophic intense as our metric point. I want to talk a little bit about, because we've talked about sort of, we went straight to your process and the things of like, I don't feel this and I don't know, is this working? But then you would share something, get the insight, and you would be able to see the change. Tell me about, before that, what maybe your expectations, hopes, or goals were, and kind of define that. Because I meant to ask that earlier, but that's such an important part too, because everyone comes in with a different set of those. So explain to me a little bit about where your headspace was. I know you were ready and proactive, and again, you had that friend that you trusted, but you also had a lot of doubt and hesitation.
Yeah, this one is interesting, just like the first one you brought up, because it's so different now. And this is something that when I talk about the program to people, it's the first thing that I bring up, because it's tangible results, or something that I can articulate,
Mhm,
being a realist and looking for a return on investment.
mhm,
And when we first started, it's so interesting you asked me what my goal was because my goal was so small. It was to just
mhm,
never feel what I was feeling for the rest of my life.
mhm.
I was very closed off to, I don't really need to fix my relationships or my personal life. Like, I didn't grow up with a huge traumatic past and I'm good. I was like, can you just fix this one health problem for me and then I'll be good?
Yeah.
And I remember when we were going through, I think, our first couple intake sessions, and you mentioned you were going through the logistics of stuff, and you mentioned if I wanted to continue after the first cycle,
Mhm,
and you were going through, and it was 4 months. You were requiring a 4 month commitment, but you were talking about all of the logistics of if I wanted to extend.
mhm.
And I was nodding and I was smiling and I was like, that's not going to happen. I don't know what you're talking about. I need the 4 months. I don't even want to do the 4 months and I'm
Yeah.
good. So
Yeah.
I didn't really have like goals or looking to the future, this healing. It was get in, fix this one health problem that I'm having that nobody's been able to point me in the right direction, and then get out. And I
Yeah.
remember such a distinct moment, and I think it was only 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, where I was like, oh my gosh. And I remember messaging my friend and I asked her about it, and she had the same epiphany. And so I was already thinking of, I don't know if I'm ever going to be done with Holly or this program. I'm just going to extend every single time. And that was probably the moment where I said that this is a lot bigger than what I expected. And
Mhm,
that's where I started creating actual goals and what I wanted to work on. But that came with its own set of challenges, because I went from being so focused on this one thing to,
mhm.
Holly, I need to solve 15 things right now. And every week it was something different. So it was a lot all at once. So I went from I think you call it the pendulum. I go from one
Yeah.
side
Mhm.
to completing the other and trying to find that center.
Yeah. Yeah, I distinctly remember when you shared that moment with me too. And again, like in my onboarding paperwork, I literally have I try to give people as much information on what to expect and the way your perspective and the way you view the program and what you're going through changes so much because it really does. And I literally highlight, I'm like, there are going to be times that you think I am the dumbest, most awful decision you've ever made in your life. You don't want to talk to me. And then there's going to be times, again, it does shift. And it's important to reference that part or the hesitation or the doubt too, because as soon as you crack open that little box of trauma, we actually start slowing down and tuning in. It's kind of like looking into a basement where you've just thrown shit your whole life but you've never been down there. And then one day you open the door and it's like, whew, if you were trying to do traditional approaches that's like just throw you in the basement and let's just go deep and hard and fix it all at once, that would be so overwhelming. But because we start building capacity from day one and getting you feeling safe, it's like once we open that door, you realize what's there, but then you also, it's coming from this place that doesn't trigger this fear and abandoned ship. I mean, it might temporarily, which is why you're in a 4-month commitment, but it's also like, whoa, there's a lot down there. I'm in a container. I have guidance. I have support and tools. And I'm really ready to go in there and start like dissecting this, to pick up all these boxes and sort through it and start cleaning this out. And so that's such a powerful analogy because we kind of live upstairs, away from that stuff. But when we go down there, we pick up this box and it's like, wow, childhood. Wow, I've carried this pattern or this issue. And that's already a lot of work. But in your case specifically, as you mentioned just a second ago, we also were navigating so much real time. Your life was not in this stable, just, okay, everything's fine. We were like trying to get the histamine, the immune system, all of that, expand a little deeper into over here. And then it was like every week there was something that was coming up. So I framed the expectation in that point of we can't both be in survival and healing like actively at the same time. And we were kind of juggling both. So tell me a little bit about that process when you started to realize there was more and kind of what came up from that and what started to make a little bit more sense about why this wasn't just about histamine and helping your immune system a little bit, but that there was more. And did that feel scary to you, or were you, I mean, I know you mentioned the like, I want to heal all the things, let's go fix it. But what did that shift start to feel like to you when you started to realize there was more?
That was probably the most overwhelming part,
Mhm.
was trying to pinpoint what to focus on. And I think how you approach it is probably what got me through, because you're obviously the subject matter expert in this. You've been doing this a long time. And so you really helped navigate just from me having conversations with you on what we should focus on, what was the most present and the most powerful.
Mhm.
But I didn't even think about it till you just brought it up, and it like I literally felt like I was like looking at my life like in reverse, like reversing an old VHS tape,
Yeah.
because that was the hardest part. Was I wasn't in a good place to open the basement and go downstairs, because every time I tried, I would get a reaction, or I would get some food fear that would come up, or something that I was dealing with
Mhm.
that would suck me back in. And so I spent a lot of time in my head, and this had to really, you had tools built that had to pull me out of my head and actually get pen to paper and radical reframing and trying to differentiate what was the most pressing and what we would have the most impact on.
Yeah.
And so when I think about that, it was you, because I couldn't imagine me being able to navigate that without being in this container, because that was difficult. But the interesting thing, and I can't even pinpoint a time, a lot of the stuff that we were dealing with histamine and the immune system, I think eventually the physical side disappeared and I didn't notice it because the mental side was so present. It
Mhm.
was fear and anxiety of what could happen and that I would never get better, or
Yeah.
this program wouldn't work for me. So mental focus, like mental struggles, is insane to navigate on top of trying to deal with past stuff.
Mhm.
And so there wasn't, it just slowly disappeared. And you would probably be able to speak to it better than me on what was happening on your end.
Yeah.
Cause I just woke up one day, not one day, but that's what it felt like, where one
Mhm.
day it just wasn't, it wasn't there anymore. Or
Yeah.
it wasn't as present.
Yeah. Yeah, the histamine stuff, a lot of times, well, every time someone comes into this program and they start this process, and they do typically have the one thing that they want to put their finger on, or that maybe they've identified. For you, it was the histamine. For someone else, it might have been like, I had a car wreck and I've just never been the same since, or whatever it was, mental, physical trauma. Or they just know something's not working in their life. They're having panic attacks. They're having some, but it's typically like one or two things that they're like, this is the thing. Like you said, I want to just find someone, go in, go out. Like it's that like military mindset of problem, go in, fix it, let's get on with our lives. But that's not how it works. And so once you do go into that and you shift gears into that, there are a lot of things that are interconnected, which is also why we don't have this perfect fluid process of this week we're going to work on this. It's always like what's coming up for you because your body has its own way of leading. But what happens is, so you came in with a histamine thing, and we had a lot that we needed to work at on an immune system level, which is like this with the nervous system. I mean, they are connected. What was fueling that was fear. So you can't look at how do I regulate my nervous system and my immune system without looking at all the things that are fueling fear. We get that under control because it's the thing that we can put our thumb on. But as soon as you do that, what happens, and your story reflects this, we shifted gears over to, okay, so now this is good. Let's look over here. And your brain literally sometimes, again, in those overwhelmed moments would be like, you know what, histamine again? And it would kind of oscillate back because
Yeah.
the fear over here triggers that same pattern. And so what I'm getting at is our brains always want to avoid really looking at the scary bear, and it either wants to check out or run away from the bear. When you face the bear, sometimes the bear that you need to heal, like again, the deeper layers might be so scary that it's like, let's go back to this one over here. This is a smaller bear. I can fight this bear, or I'm familiar with this bear. So let's go here, which is again where that process of saying, you can look at that bear again. Or I might be like, actually, like, here's the bear we're going to go towards. Because like this one actually is okay, but your brain's comfortable with that. And so when people are trying to heal certain health issues or trauma issues, when they don't have that fundamental understanding and a facilitator doesn't have that understanding, you just go in circles all the time and nothing's actually going deeper to actually heal or change. And that is such a big part because once I get you to refocus over here and we work on the big bear in this situation, suddenly you're like, and I use this silly analogy, the bear is just a cute little like hamster in the corner. It's like not a thing, but there are other things. And so you kind of shrink these problems as you face them, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller. And then you just got a bunch of little like problematic hamsters basically that you kind of like monitor all the time, but it's not these big scary bears in the room like ready to take you under. And so that is a little bit of the process. But again, that takes a little bit longer when you're not just addressing the past or the historic stuff. You've got atomic bomb going off in work, or other elements of your life that kind of need emergency attention. So it's sort of like regular healthcare versus my arms hanging off because I was just in a car wreck. I need some attention here. And there are definitely two elements of that that can coexist, but they often shift and kind of change there. So we did do a lot of work on the health stuff. And then as we started to shift to the other stuff, your brain definitely was like, let's go back to this because this is what I signed up for. This was the problem that I was ready to deal with. But as you saw, it was so interconnected. So I want to go into a deeper layer of when things went from kind of bad to worse in that you realized there was a reason you were probably in this container. It was going to go a lot deeper than just past things or histamine things. And tell me about the shift when things started getting really sort of real time, that SOS attention that you needed in your journey.
Yeah, and I think you kind of just touched on it on we were dealing with present stuff and trying to deal with past stuff at the same time, and then the present stuff became more present. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was dealing with the histamine and the immune response and all of those things, and it almost felt like every time we would get something somewhat under control, another thing in my life
Mm-hmm.
would blow up or would need attention. And that was a good indicator on the side for this to think about, that I came to the realization that I don't know what I would have done if I wasn't in this program. And so it really helped me open up and fully commit. So
Mm-hmm.
any of my doubts disappeared because the second I went from the histamine stuff and then I started having a lot of challenges in my relationship and I started dealing with a lot of betrayal trauma, past and present in real time, my indicator was I need to talk to Holly.
Yeah.
I can't process this on my own. And I think that's why you articulate it so beautifully on how you were able to identify where we needed to shift or
Mm-hmm.
when my brain was trying to pull me away from something that actually needed attention.
Yes.
So it was one thing after another, and it's been like that for the last two cycles,
Yeah.
and it's been crazy.
Yeah. And one thing I just want to speak to there, just kind of from a logistical tool belt aspect for anyone listening. One thing that's really unique about this process, too, that doesn't really exist in other therapeutic models is every week that you go through this process, you are not just getting on a call with me and talking. You're always getting some type of tangible action step. Do this tool, reference this. I either send you some prompts or an exercise, or I'm checking in, or there's accountability. There's something way outside of the session itself. But you also have this library. You literally get these recorded versions of everything that we've done as a separate exercise. So, for example, with yours, we started with all of this histamine stuff. We were just trying to get the immune system, like everything. Again, like let's just dampen the fire a little bit. Well, as we went through things, it's not that that just was something that was healed that we never had to go back to, but we didn't have to spend every minute of every session anytime that popped up, because you had that tool set that I could say, hey, I remember you were traveling at one point and the food fear came up like full force. And I was like, you've got this tapping, that we did 8 weeks ago or whenever it was, like use that or use this tool. And so that is such a powerful aspect of having this library and this tool belt, because whether you deal with histamine issues for the rest of your life or never again, a lot of our patterns that we go through are things that we experience redundantly. We go through cycles and they're good, and 6 months down the road, it's, oh, that thing again. So to have either a session that you can go back and literally experience as a second time, that's also therapeutic, because you'll hear things again, you'll be reminded, but you'll also just get new insights when you listen a second time, the session itself. And then you're also like, oh, cool, I already have a custom made tool to use that takes me a couple minutes that I can just reference back to. And I think that we leaned on that a lot with the histamine stuff when it was back and forth, back and forth. We had that you could implement and go back to that tapping routine, go back to that tool as we were moving forward. So I just wanted to highlight that we do shift gears a lot, but we have a nice base that we keep building on. And for you, as you also just mentioned, one of the heavy things, because you were navigating so many like real time, it's like whack-a-mole, one thing would pop up, we would hit it down. But we did a lot of like logistical stuff, like cognitive. Here's how you make this list. Here's how you figure out what's most important. Because if you're in the overwhelm of 1,000 bears in the room, you will just go numb. It's complete checkout. Like the thread is way too big. But one of the biggest cognitive tools is being able to have these weapons of, now there's all these bears in the room. I need to figure out which one I focus on and figure out which ones aren't important. And that part is really important too. And we did a lot of that work throughout all your stuff because you were navigating so many different things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you said it beautifully, because dealing with everything, it was so hard for me to differentiate. And the whack-a-mole is perfect, because anytime I felt like I was getting traction and I was feeling a difference,
Mhm.
especially because I struggle so much with the tools, it felt like I was in constant state of overwhelm.
Mhm.
And you helped articulate, I think I call them Hollyisms. I think
Oh,
I
no
call them
problem.
Hollyisms, where I would say, I just need a Hollyism because I know that there's something here that I need you to articulate. So let me spit
Mhm.
it out, and it's not going to make sense, but I know it's going to make sense to you.
Yeah.
And because I wasn't feeling anything in the moment, I was looking for this big, powerful change, and I was stuck in overwhelm. I
Mhm.
actually really struggled with avoiding the tools and
Mhm.
avoiding the process, because I wasn't seeing the return,
Yeah.
and I was dealing with everything, and I was stuck in overwhelm, and I was fixating on things to avoid the problems. So that was probably such a huge struggle for me, because I didn't want to do the tools, and it's a special challenge in your head when it's something that's so simple and you
Mhm.
physically cannot get yourself to do it. Because when you start the program, that's the whole thing, is this isn't things that take 30 minutes to an hour. We're not asking you to invest half your day in this.
Yeah.
It's 5 minutes here, 30 seconds here. So I go into this, that's going to be easy. That's perfect.
Yeah.
And then I can't do a tool that takes 45 seconds and zero energy. That was debilitating
Yeah.
mentally for me.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of sets the stage to go into a topic that I don't feel like I've necessarily shared on any one of these story journeys with anyone, but it is becoming increasingly a part of the therapeutic process for people that I'm having to address. As you know, I talk about neurochemistry and dopamine, and that is such a fundamental part of this work that the quote unquote somatic healing space or the psychology space, like everything's compartmentalized into traumas in your body, no traumas in your brain, no traumas in your brain chemistry. And I'm like, it's all of the things. And we can't separate any one of them and have true success if we actually want to move forward. And the brain chemistry part, because of our dopamine blasting world that we live in, is such a huge component that, again, 10 years ago, this was rarely something that I had to address with clients. And now it's almost one of the biggest components. And what I mean by that is our constant stimulation. We have that in work, we have that in our career, our relationships. And then again, we get so overwhelmed that we are in these habits of tech addiction and I just need to check out and doom scroll and bed rot and all of those things that are just culturally the norm now. And we got to a point in your journey where we really addressed that head on because we were dealing with sort of a kickback. So you'll start to make progress in this journey, and then again your brain's like, I don't know if I want to go there. Your brain is always trying to actually drag you backwards. So it's a lot of like push pull push pull. But we had gotten to a point where the I don't feel the things was really really prominent, and we, as we do, we're like, I was like, let's shine a light on this one thing. And if you would like to share what that one thing was and how we addressed it and how that was really kind of an unlock for you.
Yeah, it was the first time I didn't like you.
Okay.
You
Perfect.
kept saying through all the cycles that there was going to be a moment where you're not going to be my favorite person, and I thought I was going to make a liar out of you because I was like, I am open to this process and I am open to Holly's feedback and she can pull out all my skeletons and it'll be fine. And
Yeah.
then when I was dealing with overwhelm and all of these things that I was avoiding and I was stressed and I was discouraged, I really focused on social media.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of my hobbies right now in my 30s came from social media. Like
Hmm.
I read now, I hike, I have all these things because I found those passions through creators that I follow online.
Hmm.
And so I didn't view it as a bad thing. I viewed it as a community. I
Yeah.
didn't view it as avoiding all of my problems. It was my time to disconnect and do something that I enjoyed.
Hmm.
If you try to take it away, that's where it's very obvious that it is a form of a dopamine addiction,
Hmm.
because as soon as we tried to remove it from my life, it was weird because originally it was easy and I was like, Holly, I told you this isn't a problem. And
Yeah.
then we stopped talking about it and it slowly creeped itself back into my life.
Hmm.
And just like what you said, when you caught on that I was feeling way more overwhelmed, I couldn't focus, I couldn't get the tools done, and it was like a month after we pulled social media out and you were like, how's your scrolling intake?
Yeah. And you were like, Holly, why are you doing this? I remember that moment very distinctly because it was at the very end of our session where I kept asking all of these questions, all of these questions. And I was like, yeah, so how's that screen thing? And it was like a teenager being called out or something. You were like, why are you doing this? And I was like, yeah, uh-huh.
I asked you why you hate me
Yeah.
because I knew in the back of my head, but it's one of those things, you're good at what you do, but you were never bringing it up and I wasn't linking the two.
Yeah.
In my head, I didn't see it as a problem because it was so easy for me to get rid of it in the beginning. So
Hmm.
when it slowly creeps back in, that was the first time that I was like, Holly doesn't know. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's not affecting me. And then you did the thing that you do where you connect all of the dots and you articulate it. So as soon as you said it, it was a spotlight. And I was like, I don't like that I just agreed with you, that I just had an epiphany in
Yeah.
my head. And I responded in the way that I did because
Yeah.
I use humor to deflect.
No, like we've definitely had some of those moments. And I mean, this process is stressful and hard and emotional. But there are definitely moments where it's also just fun and hilarious. Like when the thing isn't so big and so scary and you're making progress and you're building capacity, it also does let you have those moments where everything doesn't feel so deeply personal and deeply wounding, as you develop this layer of being able to call yourself out and then also just like look at your behavior as an outsider because you're not swimming in the overwhelm and the drowning, and you can call yourself out like that. But yeah, I remember that process a lot where I can't tell you what to do. I can never tell you what to do. I can always just give you guidance. But we had a real moment where I was like, you're always going to struggle to feel your feelings and your emotions and go deeper if you're scrolling and numbing out and just suppressing it down more and more. And I think for several sessions, we went like deep into kind of the science, the simplified science of dopamine and what it does and how it's going to keep you unable to access the stuff in the basement. It's like the door that closes it, right? It just pushes that further and further away. And so you had some shifts. You did think that you're like, this is very easy. But yeah, we never actually talked about when it sort of creeped back in. Again, it goes to that it's the water we swim in. I don't think you were maliciously like, I just won't tell Holly. Your subconscious probably did a little bit, but it also was so subtle that it's 3 weeks in. I'm like, wait a minute, something's not tracking here. And let's look at it. And the social media one, again, it's so problematic, even if it is something positive. And I want to highlight that too. It's super, super problematic if you're watching stressful content, political content, anything that's like really, really polarizing and stressful to you. That's a given, right? It's also stressful if you're comparing and you're seeing stuff that's always making you feel like a little less than. It's damaging in that way. It's super damaging when people are, like we said at the beginning, following 100 creators that talk about histamine and they all have different protocols and they're just self-proclaimed coaches and nobody's qualified and you're just getting more confused. Or you even mentioned this at one point in our journey, watching people's journeys and being like, am I going to deal with this forever? You would seek the worst case scenario and it would sort of turn that back to you. Like, am I going to struggle with this forever? Because look, these people are miserable. They're not healing. But then the final component is, even if it's positive, even if it's books and plants and, all of these positive things, it's still a distraction and it's still impacting your brain chemistry in a way that makes a lot of other things difficult. And I remember another moment where it was a call out moment where when we first dove into this, you're like, but it's positive and it's all my hobbies and I love it. I read and I learn what books to read. And I was like, how many unread books do you have? And you were like, you're like, why are you doing this, Holly?
I was just thinking this. I knew you were gonna say it. That was in my head because I was like, we don't talk about the TBR. We talk
Yeah.
about what's the new book. How do
Yeah.
I know what the new book is?
Yeah, exactly. And so I through each of the things that you were like, it's positive, it's positive, it's positive. I'm like, cool. It introduced you to these positive habits. But that's when we have to really challenge ourselves and be like, it got me into reading. Great. Do I need to add 72 other books to my next to read when I have a bookshelf full of books that are unread? We don't think of that. Our brains are little self-validating, self-fulfilling loops until someone comes in and puts a blunt disruption to that thought process. And it's like someone sticking a stick in a bicycle wheel. You're just going along, but we need to just full stop. And those were definitely moments that we addressed quite a bit from that level. And it certainly helps anyone. I tell them, and I've actually evolved my process over the years to now my onboarding paperwork. It's literally almost a non-negotiable. If I have a discovery call with someone, you can go really slow and you can make this process really hard, or you can compound and expedite your process 1,000-fold if you'll commit to literally getting offline for a couple of months and focusing on this deeper, because it's that important. But it's a struggle. We're connected to family. We get news, it is a part of our culture that's very hard to pull away from. But yeah, that's been a big part of the journey. I want to go a little deeper into, we're still in this process. We've navigated so much with family, health, relationships, all the things. And I want to kind of go deeper into those elements, even though we're sort of still in them, and talk about micro version of hesitations, doubts, what it's been like to bring this work into relationships with family, your partner, and how that's sort of changing and evolving real time, and maybe what you've already learned as we're going through this.
Yeah, I think there's definitely two sides to that. There's a reward there and there's a challenge there because I'm investing so much and I'm learning so much about work that a lot of people around me have never heard about or even fully understand. That is challenging. It's shifting how I show up for my family and my friends and my relationships, and it's helping me process and, to be honest with you, just become more present and be a better person and respond better to really difficult situations, especially being in leadership. This is really, really shown through in my work. So, but it's difficult because a lot of people see the shift, but they don't understand the shift. And trying to articulate this work, I'm still trying to navigate. I have no idea how to explain to people, especially when they link it so closely to talk therapy.
Mhm.
And although I've always been an advocate for talk therapy and I really push people for mental health, I personally have never sought talk therapy. And you and I talked about this in the beginning because I didn't resonate with it. I said, you sit there and you talk about all your feelings and you talk about your problems and you go nowhere with it. And I just
Mhm.
get so frustrated, which was probably one of my hesitations joining this because I was like, I don't want to sit here and talk about it and not do anything with that energy. It almost made it worse for me.
Yeah.
So when people like link that, they don't understand the impact that this work has had, and that's very challenging to articulate to people.
Yeah.
But everybody has been incredibly supportive, and I think I've been able to navigate everything because of this.
The talk therapy loop, I definitely talk about that, on my platforms, in containers, when I'm doing any kind of presentation. That is the number one place that people's minds go to when they think of therapy. And it has its place. It's highly dependent on, what modalities are used within talk therapy. Not all modalities are the same, not all therapists are the same, but most of it is circular in nature, and it's a very temporary, you left and you expressed some things and you felt validated and heard. Great. A lot of us could get that from a friend. We could get that from journaling. We could get that in a lot of other ways. But what's the deeper patterns? How do we disrupt that? How do we go in and rewire the brain, stretch our mindset, regulate in our mind and body, and bring all of these pieces together that actually creates change and builds capacity? And it's completely different. And it is very hard. I mean, even me as a professional, I hate being told to give an elevator pitch because I'm like, how do I sum up all of these different things? Because it is so unique and that it does pull on so many modalities. And it's not just mental, it's not just physical, somatic, it's not just psychological, it's not just subconscious. We're literally working on every single system. And that's what makes it go so deep and become so transformational. Tell me about, because you mentioned work there, and because so many of the people that I work with are very, very similar in like high level leadership positions, they've just built these incredible careers and are such brilliant, strong, driven women. But that comes with some challenges, like a lot of challenges, especially since a lot of them are in male dominated industries. Tell me a little bit about how this work has helped you with some of the challenges being in a very driven career, male dominated space where nobody's talking about emotions or understanding this stuff.
Yeah, and I think this also goes back to you shining the spotlight on some of the things that I would say that you would kind of clock, where I would say something as if it was just fact or if it was almost like a positive, and you would say, we're going to stop there and we're going to talk about that. And something that I'm still navigating, so I can't really speak to it as I have found my way and I have the solution and I feel all the progress because I still struggle with when you are in leadership, and especially in a male dominated field, you tend to kind of place yourself in the background and sacrifice what you need to put others before you. And I do
Mhm.
that in every aspect of my life. And one of the first emotions that I think that I really felt that I avoided for a long time was anger and resentment. And I felt those things because they don't teach you these things. They don't teach you how your mental health and all of the things, your nervous system and your immune system, and you shoving those feelings down can affect you on a physical level.
Mhm.
And so I felt that anger and that resentment and the frustration. And I can pinpoint, I remember talking to you, I can pinpoint points in my career where I developed anxiety and I started seeing tendencies of imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize the impact it would have on me 10 years later and what I'm going through.
Yeah.
And you really helped me understand that at that point, it's still your journey and it got you here.
Mhm.
But there's still the feelings, right? So I'm working really hard right now to prioritize myself and advocate for myself in a healthy way and not sacrificing my well being for the comfort of others.
Yeah.
That is the piece that is so difficult, especially being a female in a male dominated field, because it doesn't come off as strong or powerful or independent. It's usually viewed as a negative light simply by advocating for
Yeah.
yourself. So I'm still not there. I'm still not to the healing portion, but I have the self-awareness
Mhm.
and I have the tools to kind of help navigate how I choose myself and still show up for my team.
Yeah, yeah, because that's been one of the things that would come up a little bit, but then there were like bigger things that we would need to prioritize. And priorities are not just in the moment, maybe what needs the most attention. And I'll elaborate on that in a second when we talk about family and parent stuff. But the work stuff has popped up and we've looked at it and we're just now in a space where I think it was 2 weeks ago where we really hammered in. And for the first time, there's nothing else that needs attention. We're going to go all in on this one thing, this pattern, and we're going to annihilate it. We're just going to really go hard with it and be aggressive. And sometimes life lends that opportunity in that environment. Yours, I know, will continue to change and evolve because one of the most fundamental things that gets us success in our career is to kind of become male like. When we're in these male dominated fields, we can't sit around and cry about our feelings all day. We have to compartmentalize. We become kind of stoic, but not in the good way that stoicism is meant to be. And that is one thing that people are a little bit afraid of losing. They're afraid of losing that edge and they're afraid of slowing down. And like even this past week, I had a new client. She's a couple weeks in. And she goes, I know this is part of the process, but I am so sick of talking about my feelings. And I was like, yes, it absolutely is, because it's just been a foreign concept, right? So it feels at first, you don't want to lose your edge. You're like, I can't just sit in my feelings all day long. And that's not the goal. That's not just talk therapy and let's express, because expressing your feelings has very little to do with changing the way that you feel or changing anything else around you. The expression part is this big. And women's minds and pop psychology minds and all of these feel your feelings things that are really expounded upon in social media make talking about your feelings the thing, the goal, the end all be all. And it's no, we just need to talk about it, identify, and then figure out the next action steps. So it is a hesitation at first when you start to feel the feelings. It's like, this is foreign. I feel like a baby giraffe learning to walk and I can't lose my edge. But then women are very pleasantly surprised to find that it doesn't take away their edge, it compounds it exponentially, because then they're not taking things personally and having that anxiety. They can speak very confidently in a grounded way that's perceived better. They can lead better. They can show up in their work so much better, and they don't have that imposter syndrome chipping away at them. So I'm looking forward to that just being an area that we get to go a lot deeper in, because we haven't got to really go deep into that as we've navigated everything else. But on shifting just one more gear and direction here, because we did have other things that were more important. One of my jobs too is, at the core, my work is about helping people focus on what's important. And whether that's slowing down, whether that's leaving a toxic relationship, changing careers, or being more present with their family, my job is to always say, yes, let's focus on this. And yes, this is important to your career or your job or losing weight or your health or whatever. But also sometimes that spotlight that I shine is the humans in our life and the way we show up for them. Those are the things that we don't often get redos on. We have limited time. We have people that want or need or deserve a certain version of us. And we can be so focused over here that sometimes we need to just be like, actually, here's what I need to slow down and focus on in the moment, because this moment might not be here again. And I want to just talk a little bit about how, in the phase of life that you're in with your parents and juggling a lot of caretaking roles, even outside of work, how that presented in your journey and how this work has sort of supported that. So I would just love to hear a little bit about that from you.
Yeah, starting out, it was probably all the things we've talked about, overwhelm, because I am not near my family and when I'm navigating so many things in my relationship at the time, work stuff, my own physical health, trying to prioritize myself, and then you throw in this loophole where other people need you to prioritize them
Mhm.
from across the country, overwhelm, anger, resentment,
Mhm.
all of the things. Because I felt like I was finally in a space to focus on me, and that was kind of being pulled in a different direction, just naturally, just out of timing. And then we talk a lot about, you and I have talked a lot about of the shift from your parents and having a healthy relationship or how they take care of you. And then it shifts to caregiver. And when you're dealing with parents with health issues or not the best mental health state, or they don't have the best behaviors, and you're actively working to grow and improve on you, that can create a lot of frustration because you have to balance. And something we've really worked on is, you probably have a good way to articulate it, but it's definitely pick your battles and what is the most prominent, what can you make an impact on today, and what is just going to drive a wedge or compound the issue.
Mhm.
Because especially somebody like me, I just want to fix it all, and I'm getting all these resources and these tools from you, and I just want to dump it into the people in my life
Yeah.
because it's been so rewarding and impactful for me. But sometimes it's not a part of their journey, or they're not ready for it.
Mhm.
So I really had to shift my focus to what is most important now, and what am I going to make the most impact on with taking care of my family, but not losing the progress that I've made on myself, which goes back to, just like with work, sacrificing myself for
Mhm.
other people. And I think throughout the journey, it has created a lot of guilt that I have had
Yeah.
to navigate. And this goes back to anger and resentment, not towards the situation, but towards the fact of, you're not taught these things. We don't have the resources to help you with those things. There's the anger and resentment for other people because that's not something that's talked about enough. It's not something that's researched enough, and we don't have the tools to navigate that. And it's causing a lot of suffering.
Yeah, yeah. It's as I've even shared with you, it's something that has been a big part of my own personal journey in the last 10 years, but I would say the last 5, like exponentially so. And even myself, I have from the health background that I have and the way that that helps me support my parents to the mental health, all like this massive toolbox I've dedicated my whole life to collecting tools and knowledge, but it doesn't make it any easier, truly. I mean, it does, it helps a lot, but the transition is huge to going into that caregiving. And it's very, very, very common that people are dealing with some level of childhood trauma, whether it's big, small, totally innocent on their parents' part to full on destructive, abusive. And that certainly makes it hard if parents are nearing maybe end of life stages. And there's this unfinished business of wanting resolution. When you start doing this healing work, you start to see things through this completely different lens. And it's very hard because, again, you don't have maybe 20 years and your parents aren't going to come to therapy with you. You don't have all of this ability to be like, I need to have these conversations, I need to get this closure, I need to get this validation. And that, I think, is another thing that the traditional therapy models kind of set as an expectation, is that there's all of this time and work and conversations, which rarely goes good at all. And if you don't have that, then the trauma is just there forever. And in your journey specifically, and I think through anyone that I've navigated this with, it really comes down to shifting the expectation so that whatever time that you have, whatever interactions you have, whatever resources or roles that you need to be in, you're able to be in the best heart space and head space for that, because you know what the priorities are, you know what's beyond your limits, you're able to hyper focus and identify what you can do and do that well, and then let go of the rest instead of having all of that in the mix all the time, because that is a lot to deal with and it completely pushes you into overwhelm, shutdown, guilt, shame. I mean, it's just all the negative emotions versus here's what I can do, here's what I can't do, here's what I let go, and here's how I show up as the best version of me for however much time that I have. And our thing has been priorities and expectations. Like those were the two biggest things that shifted for you with that. And if you have anything that you want to share or speak to about that and what that process was like or how that showed up for you, I'd love to hear that.
I think it's, even though we focus on one thing usually at a time, or something's focused, there's a lesson to be learned that's helping me in every aspect of my life.
Mhm.
And It's so challenging because even while we're doing this podcast, I'm thinking back to everything, and it's so difficult to articulate or even really showcase everything that has happened over the last 8 months. And it's those little moments that we're pinpointing, those changes.
Mhm.
But even when we work on something with my family and focusing on reality and expectation, and it's helping me process that, it's a tool that I'm using in my work, and I'm using in even in this program, because something I've struggled with since the beginning is I link my success to being able to, how do you say it, complete tasks. You say it in a really good way. And if I've missed something, I feel like a failure. I feel like my
Mhm.
day has been wasted.
Yeah.
I feel like I can't do anything right. And it's even when I miss stuff with the inventory assessment or the tools, there's a reaction of fear that I have to tell Holly I didn't get this done.
Mhm.
And you have really helped me with that of your days aren't going to look the same. Your best days aren't going to be the same. You're not going to hit everything. That's not the goal. The goal is not perfection. The
Yeah.
goal is trying and effort. And that's the same with my parents. There are times that I have to do things not fully to the ability that I want to, because I just don't
Mhm.
have the capacity. And
Yeah.
so when I sit down and I journal in my head, I'm like, the paper has to be perfect. My handwriting has to be perfect, or I have to start over. I
Yeah.
have to finish the thought. And you have really helped me say that even if you spend 30 seconds on it, that's better than spending no time on it.
Mhm.
And that's still something I'm navigating. And that's the first thing that came to my mind when you were talking, is that's going to take a lot for me to continue that journey and not look for the perfectionism and tie my success to that.
Yeah. It's the produce, perform, provide,
Yes.
and do it all perfect. It's like all the P's, right?
Yeah.
Those are the things that really cripple us from not only showing up as our best selves in our relationships and our professional lives, but I think the most toxic thing that exists in the world today that is causing harm is all of these TikTok influencers that are talking about like trauma and their narcissistic mothers. And if you listen to that content long enough, everyone around you is a toxic narcissist and they're awful and you should just cut them out and all the things, right? It's moving people away from tolerance and capacity and understanding and compassion towards the other people in their lives in the worst kind of way. And so when we expect that from ourselves, we also expect that from others. And it's a two-way street there. And so
Yeah.
we have this expectation of, I expect my parents to suddenly have this epiphany at 80 years old that what they did to me in kindergarten was wrong. And it's like, if that's the goal, then you'll waste a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of precious energy and time that you may not get back getting nowhere. Or you can work on what you need to work on and your emotions and your responses. Let go of what needs to be let go of, shift the expectation that you have of yourself and of them, and then maybe actually create something beautiful without ever getting that thing that is probably not going to happen. And you're kind of in the midst of that. It goes both ways of when we have those really high expectations of ourselves, it does make us expect those things. And we've talked about that with your work too. We could probably just count on Bob at work, that Bob's not a real person, but Bob at work is probably not going to say this or respond to you this way or react this way. It's kind of taking that personal edge out of it. And that feels good. It feels really good to focus on what you can change and what is important and let go of all of those other things. But it is definitely a work in progress. I mean, it absolutely will be. It shows up in our relationships more than anything because we have to find that line of what's a healthy expectation? What am I compromising on? And what is actually just, okay, that's not going to happen. I just accept that and I find a way to respond in the best way possible. We exist in a world where we should always be trying our best to show up every day like it's our last, because it could be, treating the people around us like it could be their last. But obviously, with aging parents or aging family members, it truly is one of the biggest gifts to be able to lean into our own healing journeys and cultivate compassion and gratitude and shifts that benefits our relationship with them in a beautiful way. And I've seen that play out so many times, like so many times. I've unfortunately worked with numerous people over the years that had very turbulent relationships with their parents and things weren't resolved, or there was anger, resentment, and parents pass away. And it's the most profound guilt and regret I've ever seen anyone experience. And so being able to shift that real time with the people in our lives is such a beautiful part of this work. Does it help your mental health and your success and your happiness and all of these things? Yes, but I go back to, at the core, our relationships with people and how we interact with them and experience them is just, it doesn't get any better than that. Like, that's kind of the point of all of it. So we'll continue diving in deep to that and finding ways that align with you, with, you know, anybody that's in these type of containers. It's such a healing process for you, but it also gets to benefit everyone around you. And with kind of a closing note there, is there anything that you can kind of peg from the people around you that, without, with whether they know you're in this process or not, that you, was there a moment maybe that someone else was like, wow, you're different, or you responded different, or I think this is good for you, anything like that that you can remember?
Yeah, I did not anticipate that question, and I love that you asked that question because as you were talking, something that came to my head is all of the things we're going through are struggles internally that people don't see.
Mm-hmm.
They're not on the outside, and it's really difficult, especially when you're somebody that is private like me
Mm-hmm.
and not for always the right reasons. Me trying to hold space for myself in a room, and I don't. I usually kind of force myself to fade to the background.
Mm-hmm.
And I also don't want to impact other people or negatively impact other people's emotions because of what I'm dealing with. So I've also had to work on letting people show up for me because the people want to know the things that I'm dealing with, but they'll never understand the internal struggles. And a lot of this has been mental. It's been mental turmoil that I've been trying to navigate. So you get nervous that they're going to catch on to all of the bad, that they're going to say, you just don't seem like yourself. You seem distant. And
Mm-hmm.
trying to explain that is so difficult. So that was my fear at the beginning when I was trying to unpack these things and I was dealing with real time trauma on top of my past. I was like, I don't want to show up differently for my team and not be able to prioritize them because that's why I do what I do. That's why I'm passionate. And I was terrified of that. Prioritizing myself would negatively impact them. And halfway through this journey, I was at work on a random day, and one of my direct reports came up to me, and we were just talking like we normally do. And he kind of gave me this look, and I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm good." I was like, "Why?" He's like, "You just have an aura about you." And I was like, "I have an aura?" And he was like, "You have a really positive aura." And I said, like just today? And he goes, no. He's like, I'm noticing it today. He was like, but you just have this, you've had this energy about you these last couple months. And it was so validating for me because I have been struggling. Like I'm not denying that.
Yeah.
I have been going through so much. And so if my aura is still improving and they're seeing a difference in a positive light,
Mm-hmm.
that's huge, especially because I've never gone through something like this and dealt with such traumatic things in my life. And so that I'm still showing up, that is a subtle thing, not subtle. That is a big thing
Mm.
that I don't necessarily always feel
Yeah.
that my team is seeing a positive difference despite all the reasons to find something not positive in my life.
Oh my gosh. I love that. I don't think that you shared that with me, which is
I
ironic.
know.
So I really love that I actually asked that
Yeah.
question. I don't even know that I've ever asked it before, but yeah, what a testament. And it's also just kind of silly because I know your workspace and I can kind of visualize the environment and the type of kind of gruffy men. Just the fact that he used the word aura, like, I don't even know what that
Aura.
means, like an aura, but it's that, it's the proof that people feel things, and it's the science of mirror neurons and co-regulation, and that people pick up what we put out. And it's it's such a beautiful testament. It's hysterical that the word Zen is in like all of my companies in some way. It's kind of like the simplified version of what I aim to help people achieve. And I cannot tell you how many times, from a massage therapist till a person checking me out at groceries, is like that same moment where they're like, there's something, like it's a and they literally will say the word Zen, and it's so hysterical because it's like always that word. And it's the same, like you mentioned, like sometimes it's when I'm having maybe a stressful day or I'm not feeling the best. But when you're doing this deeper work and you have this connection and awareness, even when it's not perfect, even when you're having a bad day, even when you're navigating it real time, people do sense that. And I think it especially shows up in the way that we show up for work and leadership. And the guy at work is, it's like, I don't know what it is, but there's something that I can recognize, that my nervous system can recognize in her. I think it's an aura, so I'm going to call it that. And it is, it's energetic, it's their brains picking up. And it's such a cool thing. I think I'm going to make that one of my standard questions that I ask because I
That
love
was,
hearing that. And yeah, people pick up things for sure.
yeah.
Okay, so in closing, we're going to do just a couple rapid fire, simplified questions to end on a super strong note. What was one of the most meaningful breakthroughs that you noticed in this process? Is there one thing that, boom, that was it? That was a breakthrough for me.
The first thing that comes to mind is being able to talk through a situation and ending it with you saying, that's exactly what I was going to say. Because at the beginning, I couldn't do that. And you were trying to probe me and you were being like,
Mhm.
what do you think I mean by this? What do you think I'm going to say? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Stop asking me that. And I remember even a week ago, I was talking through something to you and you said, that's exactly what I was going to say. So I love that you got there on
Mhm.
your own because
Yeah.
that's meaningful for me because I'm such an independent person
Mhm.
that although I believe that I need this space and I need your expertise and articulate things, I also want to get to a point where I can talk through things and be able to self-reflect.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I do have to speak on that one really quickly because I remember it's kind of taking the training wheels off. Again, my literal job is to be the mirror and highlight and spotlights, like all the things that we've mentioned. But also, there is a point where, okay, now I'm going to test. We have to put things to the test. And I've done that a lot with you in the last couple of months or so, where it's fill in the blank. I might set you up for the statement, or I really challenge you and you know what I'm going to say. Can you connect the dots here? Because if I don't push you and I'm always just like spoon feeding you, that's about me instead of like building your strength and resilience. And yeah, you have like there's been a lot of those moments where I'm okay, let's just test. And you can take over my job now. So that has been really, really cool. And that will continue to just build and compound. We've shifted gears so many times, so it's not just like one linear path. But the more we do that, that's where that confidence builds. Like my goal has always been for people to walk away from these containers with so much internal confidence and resources and capacity that they are literally like set for life. I mean, sure, you're always going to need support and to revisit the work, and challenges happen and life changes. But when you can build that on a really deep level and teach you to fill in the gaps, like that's a skill set, that's an investment you have for the rest of your years on this planet. And I just don't think it gets any better than that. So, okay, next
Yeah.
question. What was the best part of the process for you?
Not, oh, that's a tough one. I always just say the first thing that comes to mind, but I'm like, what if there's a better one? Not being afraid to feel my emotions and not feeling the need to shrink myself for the comfort of others.
Mm,
And I think that's going to be an ongoing thing just because of my personality, but I don't fear crying anymore. I don't look at it as a weakness. I look at it as a strength because I can feel emotions on such a deep level and I almost feel empathy for those that can't feel that.
yeah, for sure. What was the hardest part?
Two things because I think of beginning and I think of now, and I think the beginning, the hardest part was truly feeling like this wouldn't work for me, and it was a fear that I was going to be the one person that invested all this time and energy and I wasn't going to get better.
Mhm.
And I think that that's not true to this day anymore, but you always wonder if you're going to get out of it what you want out of it. So that was really difficult for me. And the thing I will probably always navigate, because just my environment is such high pace, high reward, is it's so difficult for me to not feel the difference, a big, massive change. I look for that for reassurance. And it's so difficult to get myself to commit to the tools and the resources and reaching out to you when I don't feel an immediate return.
Mhm.
And I think I'm going to deal with that for a long time.
Yeah. Another analogy, because I just love analogies, is I always tell people if you wait until you get a cavity, that's probably not the best way to take care of your teeth. And then also, you don't feel the absence of cavities every time you brush your teeth. You just notice over time that you have good oral health. It's so simple to
Yeah.
think of it that way, but it's such a perfect correlation. From the get-go, you had that expectation because I think you shared that with me like week 3. You knew that this call was at the end of this and you're like, I'm thinking that I'm going to be the one person. And I'm like, first of all, I don't believe that. So you can borrow my belief because I already know how this goes. But I told you from that moment, your process is your process, and as long as you have this expectation that is like constricting you, you're not going to get anywhere. So you have to take that off and leave it at the door and allow this process to look like what it's going to look like. And expectation is so big across the board when we're talking about like health, happiness, healing, when we learn to shift that. And one of the tools I use is the radical reframe. Like, what's your expectation? And all of that. And so that was like lesson one that
Yeah.
straight out of the gate. And here we are. So, final question. Well, two final questions. What surprised you the most about this process, especially now that you're this far in the journey? What was the most surprising?
That I didn't realize how much I needed this space. Coming from somebody that always advocated for therapy, but didn't seek therapy because I didn't feel connected to it.
Mhm.
And I just, I don't know where I would be today without this space. And I think that's the challenging thing is if somebody were to ask me, like, when do you see like transitioning out from Holly? I have I have no idea. I'm not focused on that anymore. I was so focused in the beginning of a deadline. I don't have a deadline anymore because right now this is working and it's changing my life in ways that I could never have anticipated. And some people have those shifts in their life in their 30s and you hear people talk about like the epiphanies that they have.
Mhm.
Never thought that that would be me. And this one is huge and I'm having such gratitude and patience and grace for the person I was before and all the things that I didn't know. I just didn't realize how much I needed a space like this.
Yeah. I think that speaks to, sometimes I've worked with anywhere from children, like my youngest client, literally did a therapy modality on like a newborn, all the way up to people that are in their 70s, 80s, 90s. My whole career has had this beautiful spectrum of humans from birth to their final days, and it is hard when we talk about coming into a certain container and realizing how much there is to heal. Sometimes people when they're in their 50s, 60s, if they're coming to this work a little bit later in life, there is this process that they go through where it's actually like grieving themselves and like looking back at all the years that they didn't have this perspective or this knowledge or these tool sets and stuff. And it's hard. Like that's a really painful thing to go through. I always, of course, remind them that anytime is the best time, and that I think people come to this work when it's best aligned for them. But to come into this work into your 20s and your 30s and build the skill set, the capacity, the knowledge, and the awareness, it's literally like reaching into the future and changing time, like changing the trajectory of your life where you didn't lose 40 years in a job that sucked your soul because you didn't believe that you could do better or whatever it was, And I truly believe that it's never too late. But I also just really cherish when people kind of come into this in an earlier stage in their lives, because I know the value that it's going to have and how it's going to shift the rest of their life. Having dealt with, an eating disorder at such an early age for myself, it was such a passion of mine to work with younger girls. Again, I'm like, if I can save you 40 years of crash dieting and wrecking your body and hating yourself, I just can't imagine any work that's more fulfilling than that, than to help people not experience things. And so sometimes you might be on the other side of a lifetime of trauma, but also this can help you navigate your past, but also change your future so much.
Think I think what you just said, I really is also I don't know if it's surprising. It was probably one of the best moments because one of the things I struggle with therapy, especially with strangers, and I've said this so many times, is so what do? You meet with a therapist. What if you tell your whole life story, you don't relate to them, they can't support you, and then you just start over? And they're like, that's exactly what you do. And I'm like, absolutely not. That's a no for me.
Yeah.
And so there was a fear coming into this of that. And I can't, maybe my friend definitely helped me with saying, like, you have got to invest in this and be completely open with Holly to get out of it what you need to. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind. And I stayed really open
Mhm.
to you and how you chose to navigate this. But something that was so helpful for me is your ability to relate, because that's something I really struggle with therapy or talking to people in my life right now is they can't relate because they haven't had those experiences and all they do is they respond with that's a lot. Oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like, thanks. And sometimes you give little nuggets where you talk about something that you went through and relationships and health, and it's all these things, and it validates somebody that maybe doesn't feel like this is normal. And I've said that to you a couple times, like, is this normal or am I crazy?
Yeah.
You do really well with relating, at least with my personal experiences, which I feel like has made me have the ability to open up and connect without fear of judgment.
Yeah. I distinctly remember one of my first therapeutic processes that set me on this trajectory as a career path. I went to an EMDR therapist. I had read the book. I mean, I'm talking this is literally like 17, 18 years ago. Read the book about EMDR therapy long before it was like the pop culture phenomenon that it is. And I was like, oh, this is what I need. It's about trauma. And I was studying how trauma's in the body, and like my whole world was waking up and opening up to this. And so I was like, oh, I'll go to this trauma therapist who does this therapy. And we sat down, and literally for 6 sessions, she just acted like I was her own personal reality TV show. Like it was entertaining to her. I was sitting there like shaking, telling all of this really traumatic stuff. And I had no tools or verbiage, or I couldn't even recognize what was happening, but she should have as the therapist. But it was very much like she was so interested. It was like it was entertainment. And that was so traumatizing in its own way. Like the one person that I went to that was supposed to have the skills and the resources just acted so like interested at the severity of all the stuff that I had gone through. And I think there's a world of great therapists, but then there's just so many complacent, checked out therapists that lack a lot of skills, especially from the trauma side, because they're not trained, that people, they open up and they have this like, I'm sharing all of this stuff. And then it feels like you just strip down naked and someone's just staring at you. It's like, okay, there's nothing that you're offering me back, not tools, not validation, not resonance, anything. And that feels really, really, really shitty. So I've kind of experienced that too. And I think a lot of people that do the talk therapy, we don't hear as much about the really negative sides. I think people have a lot of shame and embarrassment about that. They think it's a them problem if therapy was stressful, triggering, traumatic. Or maybe they have a therapist that's like, okay, I think they get me. But when they really look back, if they're honest with themselves, the needle hasn't moved at all. They just feel like finally they're paying someone per hour to listen to them. And I'm like, it should be more about just listening. You know, it should be much, much more than that. If you met someone today that described any range of mental, physical, I'm dealing with this, like I'm overwhelmed, stressed, everything. They were very hesitant. They had tried different things, or maybe they never had. They were just in this overwhelmed, shut down, I don't even think there is a solution kind of space. And they were considering looking for a solution. What would you tell them if they were considering doing this process?
That question gave me chills, which is funny because I didn't get a good I didn't get a good like first response in my head, but it gave me full body chills. I think the challenging thing there is, I think one, it's I would probably show them this podcast because it's what you do. And like I said, you can't go into all the specific things that we did, but even when you and I were recapping the first cycle, it was kind of the same like points. And I that's what I would go over with them is the points that we have touched on here, because I'm a realist and I'm looking for a return and I want to relate them to them in a way. A good example for me is I would, when listening to their story, I would explain to them how this process is different from what they've already tried. And a good example to tie it back to the question that you just gave was I did do one talk therapy session before even talking to my friend or joining you. And when I told her everything I was going through, the one thing she shared with me was, have you tried going for a walk? And I was so frustrated because I was like, yes, I've gone for a walk. Thank you for nothing.
Yeah.
And I was frustrated, Holly, and you would probably be able to articulate my answer better. I'm going to say it my way, and then you can probably tie a Hollyism to it. So if somebody had those moments, you said the same thing to me, but you said it very differently because you related it and you tied it back to mental, emotional, and physical.
Mhm.
You have died on the hill of walking is what you do. This is the most, if you take anything away from this, you need to walk,
Yeah.
Steele. But it's very different to say, have you tried walking? Versus Steele, you need to understand this is what you're going to do. This is why you're going to do it. Because then I understand the importance of it. I'm not just listening to a therapist that's just telling me to go do something because they think it would make me feel better. You
Right.
tied it back to a scientific result. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I love that you shared that because That is one of the things that I absolutely adore doing. I love simplifying the really complex stuff that I love to geek out on, but most people aren't interested in that, but they also don't have the capacity to really understand that on a deeper level. So when I can simplify something, it's so important. But I really truly believe in not just telling someone to do something, but really helping them understand why. And that is the part that I love that I get to do is say, yeah, so it's not just about walking. I could feel the eye roll moment because I've had moments like that. Doctors in my own health journey were like, yeah, so do you have a hobby? And I'm like, I will murder you. But going deeper to really explain what's happening in the nervous system, what's happening when you get in functional freeze, when you're shut down, the way the brain, like all of those things, when you can actually understand that, which is why I'm so passionate about walking now, is I, in my days as a strongman athlete, which is this brutal sport that I tortured my body with, thought walking was the thing that 100-year-olds did. I couldn't have a bigger disdain for it. And now it is the most precious, incredible regulator. It's just everything. And so it's because I've studied it so much, I've seen the way it shows up for me that, yeah, I love being able to break that down. And I think that that's a big part of the process that helps it become someone's identity and way of being instead of just, have you tried eating some fruits and vegetables? No, let me really break down all the reasons that these things matter, which we also do in the process too. You know, we talk about vitamins, minerals, chemistry, all the things, but you have to have a base understanding for that to go deeper instead of just be told, get off your phone and go for a walk. Okay, thanks. Did I just pay you for that?
Well, and I think that's what builds trust. So if I thought of anything that has been the most impactful that I would share with somebody and try to articulate the way you did is that's how you build trust in the process and in you as a person is to be able to explain why you're giving me those things and you're not just reading from a textbooks of what you think might help me. You can tie it back to my personal situation and be very specific. So I just think that it's not a one size fits all with all of your tools. And that's if I saw anybody that was struggling with every other tool or process that they've tried, that's what makes this one different.
Yeah. There's like the classic meme where, you know, the detective has all the photos on the wall and it's all the strings and the lines trying to solve a case. And that is really what I've always loved to do in life, why I'm always in some type of continuing education, because there's always more pieces. And to be able to look at someone who's overwhelmed, but they're dealing with this emotional thing, but they're taking this supplement and they're not sleep. Like those all seem like 15 different things and they kind of are. But when I can connect all the dots and then give you one or two tools, but also explain why those tools will affect everything, that's how you can create a lot of systemic change with one or two things. And that I think is kind of the specialty of this work. What I love about what I get to do is breaking it all down. I was looking at your numbers before we started. Your mental numbers were 116 and your last number was 52. Like that's just over time,
Oh my
everything
gosh.
getting better and better and better and better. Your physical was 64 and you were already on the other side when we did that first one of a lot of the more acute stuff. But a rolling number in the 20s, you know, like these are big changes that we've achieved with walking, but a lot of other things in the process
Yeah.
as we can, because you've got to be able to shift gears and recognize what tool, why the tool, and how it moves the needle on all the areas for it to be something that you're motivated to do. And again, be called out when you need to be called out and all the things. So it's such a process. It's such a joy, an honor to get to facilitate and walk people through this journey. I am so glad that you've been in this container with me. I love seeing all your growth and healing, and I know it's just going to continue to unfold. So is there anything final that you want to share? Just anything at all to anyone about your process, anything? I'll just give you one final moment.
No, I think the flow of this was great and I covered everything that I think has been coming up in the last week. I think we touched on everything perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for showing up, for being vulnerable, for trusting yourself, your process, and sharing with others and investing in yourself. And I will see you on your next session.
Thank you so much, Holly.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Brain Body Speak. If you found today's episode valuable, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and please consider leaving a review so that more people can find the show and benefit from this content. It means the world to me. I read every single one of them, and it really encourages me to keep moving forward with this mission and this podcast. Also, Tag me on Instagram at Brain Body Speak and let me know what resonated with you specifically about this episode, and you'll be entered into my monthly giveaway of a free $500 value Brain Body Reboot course. To take this journey further, visit brainbodyspeak.com for free resources and to see our complete suite of self-paced programs. If you're ready to start nourishing your brain and body today, snag something from my premium supplement line by visiting zeninabottle.biz. Remember, 300 Zens, our magnesium product, is my absolute fave and my number one recommendation for people to get started. Until next time, remember, your transformation begins with your brain, your body, and your nervous system. And I hope you found value from this show that you can put into action today. Love and Zen. Until next time.